So I've been doing some studying for the message that I'm bringing to our students tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we're going to be specifically talking about an enemy that we battle each and every day as we live this Christian life, and that's our flesh. And our flesh is what causes our sinful desires, and it's when we give in to those desires that we sin. And so we're going to be looking at the reality that we have to acknowledge that, and how we, as followers of Jesus, can overcome that. And in doing that, I've been looking at the chapters of Romans 7 and 8, where Paul talks about the law of sin and death, and he also talks about the law of the Spirit and of life that comes through Christ. And we know that Scripture speaks to the fact that we have the law, and the reason that God gave the law was not as something that you and I could ascertain or ever fulfill, but God gave the law to Moses and the people of Israel and to us to show us that we are indeed sinners, that we are indeed incapable of meeting this standard of God. And so we are bound by the law of sin and death as a result of the law, and because we are sinful. And however, Christ came, and he, being God, who was and is God, was able to fulfill the standard of the law, right? And so because he was able to fulfill that, he met up to the standard, but then he took on our sin and death, he took on our punishment, and then as not only did he do that, but he defeated death, and he rose again on the third day, giving life. And so you and I, if we are followers of Jesus, we can have life because of Christ. And through Christ, we are no longer bound by the law of sin and death because Christ defeated that. So now we have the law of the Spirit and of life. And so you and I, if you are a follower of Jesus, I'm a follower of Jesus, that means that I'm not bound by sin and death. I'm bound by life and bound by the Spirit of God. And as a result, I have the ability to defeat sin. Because of Christ, because of the Spirit living inside of me, I have the ability to choose right. And thinking about those things, I can't help but think about labels. And why I bring that up is because as working with students, it's so often easy to label students. And this happens even in the adult world as well, not just in the student world, but relate a little bit more with students, as that's the focus of my ministry. And we see with students, like sometimes I can label them the good kids, the ones that tend to follow everything that I ask or whatever. They're the good kids, or we have the bad kids, the ones that always seem to, every now and then they seem to disobey, or the kids that are going to pay attention, or the kids that are lazy and don't pay attention, or whatever. Oftentimes that spills over into their life, and oftentimes these labels can become our identity. The students can become their identity. And I was talking with a student one time, and he said, I think sometimes kids kind of mess up, and they get into trouble, and so they get punished, and then all of a sudden they get this label as the bad kids, and they keep hearing that called upon them, that you're a bad kid, you're a bad kid. And so just in essence they just kind of assume that identity, and that's who they become, and they take that on because that's what they hear, and so they just continue to choose to do bad things. Whereas if we remove those labels and help them to rise above and rise to a different standard, then maybe they'll rise above that, and they could be better. And so thinking about that, and then thinking about church and how the Scripture and how that relates to us, so often we hear thrown around in the church scene this label that I'm just a sinner saved by grace. By golly, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. And the truth of the reality is that I was a sinner saved by grace, because yes, I was a sinner. I was dead in my sin. But because of the grace of God, because of Christ, and by choosing to trust in Him, I am no longer, according to Scripture, I am a new life, a new creation. I'm a child of God. So I'm no longer a sinner saved by grace. I'm a child of God. That is my identity. And so often I think if we we hear that thrown around, and so often we kind of tell that to ourselves. Well, man, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. You know what? I'm just a sinner saved by grace. And I think what happens is that often becomes an excuse for us, an excuse to give in to our fleshly desires, an excuse to give in because I know, well, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. What else am I supposed to do? What else am I expected to do? You know, and God's grace is going to be there. I know it. So, man, I might as well just give in, or it's so easy to give in because of that. So we need to stop using the label that I'm a sinner saved by grace and be reminding ourselves that that's what I was, but now I am a child of God. Now I am a follower of Jesus, and I am called to be more like him. I'm called to raise the standard because Christ fulfilled the law, and the Spirit of Christ is living inside of me. Therefore, I am the one that was able to fulfill it. And therefore, I have the one that is able to give me the strength, give me the wisdom, give me the discernment, give me the oomph that I need to overcome sin. Because the chains of sin are no longer bound to me. They have been broken, and therefore I can choose to rise above it. So I just hope that encourages you this morning as a follower of Jesus, if you are. And maybe you can help me begin to change the culture of this label that I'm just a sinner saved by grace. Yeah, you were a sinner saved by grace, but now you are a child of God. You're a child of the King, and so you should rise above. You should begin to be more and more like Christ. And may I remind myself that I'm no longer a sinner saved by grace, but I am a child of the King. May I begin to live a life that looks more and more like Jesus. Thank you.